Something beneath the cabin floor made his war-trained dog freeze, and it wasn't the storm outside. The crowbar slips in his grip as Atlas slams his paws against the warped boards, a low growl vibrating through the room. Rain hammers the roof, wind howls through the cracks, but that hollow thud under the floor doesn't match any of it. Caleb leans closer and hears it again. What do you think is under that floor? The sound didn't belong to the night. Caleb Hayes came awake before he understood why, his body moving first, mind catching up a half-second behind. His hand swept across the small table beside the couch, knocking over an empty tin cup as he reached for something that wasn't there anymore. Metal clattered on wood, too loud, too sharp. He froze. The cabin held its breath. Then he heard it again. A low, steady growl. Not outside. Inside. Caleb turned his head slowly, eyes adjusting to the thin gray light leaking through the gaps in the boarded window. The fire in the stove had burned down to embers. The cold had crept back in, settling into the corners like something alive. Atlas stood near the center of the room. The German Shepherd wasn't barking. That was what made Caleb's chest tighten. Atlas didn't waste sound unless there was something to warn about. His head was low, ears locked forward, body angled toward the far side of the cabin. The floor. His claws scraped again, slow, deliberate, not frantic, focused. Caleb pushed himself up without a sound. Years of training moved through him like muscle memory. Keep low, control breath, listen first. No footsteps outside. No wind shifting the trees in a way that didn't feel right. No voices, just the scrape of claws and that low, vibrating growl. He reached for the flashlight instead. His thumb found the switch, but he didn't turn it on yet. He waited, counting seconds in his head the way he used to on patrol. 5. 10. Nothing changed. Atlas didn't move from that spot. Caleb clicked the light on. The beam cut across the cabin, catching dust drifting in the air, the warped boards, the sagging beams overhead. It landed on Atlas's back first, the fur along his spine raised, then followed his line of sight down to the floor. A section of wood, darker than the rest, worn. Caleb stepped closer. The boards creaked under his weight, the sound sharp in the quiet. Atlas didn't shift, didn't even glance at him. Whatever had his attention, it wasn't Caleb. Easy, Caleb muttered, his voice rough from sleep and cold. Atlas's ears twitched, but his gaze stayed locked. Caleb crouched, the old ache in his knees flaring. He ignored it. His hand hovered over the spot, then pressed down lightly. The wood gave a little. Not much, just enough. He pulled his hand back, listened. Nothing underneath. No movement. No sound. Atlas scraped again, harder this time. The claws hit wood with a hollow note that echoed just a fraction longer than it should have. Caleb's eyes narrowed. He shifted, planting his knuckles against the board and knocking once. Solid wood gave a dull, flat response. He knocked again, a few inches to the side. Different. Not loud, not obvious, but wrong. A hollow echo buried under the surface. Caleb didn't move for a long moment. The beam of the flashlight stayed fixed on that section of floor. His breathing slowed, steady, controlled. The same rhythm he'd forced into himself in places far hotter than this. Places where the ground itself could betray you if you didn't pay attention. Atlas let out a soft whine. Not fear. Insistence. Caleb exhaled through his nose, long and slow. Yeah, he said under his breath. I hear it. The wind picked up outside, brushing against the cabin walls. The structure answered with a low groan, old wood shifting against itself. For a second, The sound folded into something else in Caleb's head. Rotor wash. Distant, heavy, closing in. He blinked. The cabin came back. Cold, quiet, still. Atlas hadn't moved. Caleb reached out again, this time pressing harder. The board dipped just slightly under his palm. Not enough to break. Enough to notice. He dragged the light across the edges. There. A seam. Faint. Nearly invisible under the grime and age. Not part of the original floor. Added later. Covered. Hidden. Caleb sat back on his heels. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Atlas lowered his head closer to the floor, nose almost touching the wood, and let out another low, steady growl. Not at something moving. At something waiting. Caleb's jaw tightened. He didn't reach for tools. Not yet. Didn't pry the board up. Didn't dig. Instead, he stayed there in the half-light, flashlight steady in his hand, staring at that small, wrong section of floor like it might look back. The night stretched on around them, and for the first time since he'd stepped into that cabin, Caleb Hayes didn't feel alone in it. The thought stayed with him longer than it should have. He didn't touch the floor again that night. Instead, he backed away, slow and deliberate, never turning his back on that section of warped boards. Atlas followed, step for step, still watching the spot like it might shift if he looked away. Caleb added another log to the stove. The fire caught slowly, flames licking up through the dry wood, pushing back the cold inch by inch. He sat down in the chair nearest the door, not out of habit, but because it was the only position that let him see everything at once. Entry point. Window. Floor. Atlas settled beside him, not sleeping, not even lying fully down, just waiting. Caleb didn't sleep again. The wind moved through the trees outside, a low, steady hush that could have been anything if you let your mind drift too far. He didn't let it. He kept his breathing steady, his eyes half-lidded, conserving energy the way he had learned years ago. By morning, the light came gray and thin through the cracks in the boards. The cabin looked smaller in daylight, less like a place holding something, and more like a place falling apart. But the floor didn't look any less wrong. Caleb stared at it while he drank from a dented tin cup. Coffee. Black. Bitter. The kind that kept you moving, not thinking. Atlas didn't go near it now. That was new. The dog stayed close to Caleb's side, watching the door, the windows, the tree line beyond, like the threat had moved, or spread. Caleb stood, joints stiff, and pulled his jacket on. He grabbed the keys to the truck, hesitated, then clipped the old leash to Atlas's collar. "Let's get some air," he said. Atlas followed without resistance. Outside, the cold bit harder. The forest stretched out in every direction, tall pines standing close enough to block most of the sky. No tracks in the dirt except their own. No movement. No sound but the wind. Caleb walked the perimeter of the cabin, slow, methodical, checking sightlines, angles, the kind of quiet sweep he'd done 100 times in places that didn't forgive mistakes. Nothing stood out. No fresh footprints. No broken branches. No sign anyone had been close during the night. Still didn't feel clean. Atlas stopped near the back of the cabin and sniffed the ground. His ears twitched once, then flattened slightly. He let out a low breath but didn't growl. Caleb crouched beside him, scanning the area. The soil was packed, uneven. Old marks layered over older ones. Nothing recent he could read clearly. "Nothing," he murmured. But Atlas didn't move. Caleb stood again, slower this time. His back tightened as he straightened, a dull pull that reminded him he wasn't 25 anymore. Not even close. He turned back toward the cabin. For a second, just a second, the angle of the doorway hit him wrong. The light, the silence, the way the place sat there, waiting. And something inside him shifted. Not fear, recognition. 3 months earlier, the house on Linden Street had been quiet too. Too quiet. Caleb had noticed it before anything else. The way the refrigerator hummed a little louder when there wasn't another voice in the room. The way the floorboards creaked without being covered by conversation. Rachel stood at the kitchen table, papers spread out in front of her. Neat, organized, every page clipped, tabbed, labeled. She'd always been like that. "Dad, it's just a formality," she said, her tone even, practiced. "In case something happens. This way I can help you manage things." Caleb stood near the window, not the table. He watched the street instead. 2 cars passed. One slowed at the corner. A dog barked somewhere down the block. Ordinary sounds. Safe sounds. He nodded once. "Where do I sign?" Rachel didn't hesitate. She turned the pages, pointed to the lines. He stepped forward, pen already in his hand. His eyes didn't follow the words. They tracked the reflections in the glass behind her. The faint movement of trees. The shadow shifting along the sidewalk. He signed. Page after page. His name came out clean, steady. Same way it had on reports, on documents, on things that mattered more than paperwork ever should. Rachel smiled, just a little. "Thanks, Dad. This makes everything easier." He handed the pen back without looking at her. "Easier for who?" She didn't answer right away. "Just easier," she said finally. The knock came 2 weeks later. Hard. 3 quick hits. Caleb was already on his feet before the second one landed. He moved toward the door, body angled, weight balanced. Atlas, still younger than, stronger, was at his side, silent but alert. When Caleb opened the door, 2 men stood there in work jackets. A truck idled at the curb behind them. "Mr. Hayes?" one of them asked. Caleb didn't answer. The man held up a clipboard. "We're here for the move." Caleb's gaze shifted past them to the truck, then to the street, then back to the clipboard. "Move?" Rachel stepped into view behind him. "It's okay, Dad. I told you this might happen fast." He turned his head, slow. She wasn't looking at him. She was looking at the men. "Just take the essentials," she said. "We've already arranged the rest." Caleb stood there for a long moment. The house behind him. The street in front. Atlas pressed lightly against his leg. "Didn't read the papers," Caleb said quietly. Rachel exhaled, just enough to show something like impatience. "You trusted me." He nodded once. "Yeah." The men shifted awkwardly, waiting. Caleb stepped aside. "Take what you need," he said. Back in the present, Caleb stood outside the Montana cabin, staring at the door. Atlas moved first, brushing past him and stepping onto the porch. He paused at the threshold, ears lifting, then walked inside without hesitation. Caleb followed. The cabin felt different now. Not just old, occupied. He closed the door behind him, slower than before. His eyes went straight to the floor. The same warped boards, the same faint seam. Nothing had changed. And yet, Atlas didn't go near it. He circled once, then lay down near the door, facing inward, watching. Caleb stepped closer to the spot. He crouched again, hand hovering over the wood. This time he pressed harder. The board shifted, just enough to confirm what he already knew. Something was under there. Something that hadn't been meant to be found. Caleb sat back on his heels. His jaw tightened. Not in fear, but in calculation. Timing, tools, light, exit routes. He stood up slowly. "Not today," he said under his breath. Atlas's ears twitched. Caleb grabbed his jacket, already moving toward the door. Because whatever was under that floor, it wasn't going anywhere, and neither was he. Caleb let the door shut behind him with a muted thud, the kind that didn't carry far. Atlas was already off the porch, nose low, scanning the ground in short, controlled sweeps. Not wandering, working. Caleb took a slow breath, eyes moving across the tree line, left to right, then back again. He didn't rush it. Nothing in his body rushed anymore. Not after Afghanistan, not after the years that followed. Speed got people killed. Stillness kept you alive. The truck sat where he'd left it. Dust settled along the hood. Windshield streaked from last night's wind. He reached it, unlocked the door, and paused before getting in. Atlas hadn't followed. Caleb turned. The dog stood halfway between the truck and the cabin, head angled toward the woods behind the house. His posture had changed. Subtle, but enough. Weight forward. Ears tight. "Atlas," Caleb called, low. The dog didn't move. Caleb stepped away from the truck, boots pressing into the dirt without sound. He came up beside him, following the same line of sight into the trees. Nothing obvious. No movement. But the silence felt layered, like something had passed through and left just enough behind to be noticed if you knew how to listen. Caleb's jaw tightened. "Yeah," he muttered. Atlas let out a short breath, then finally turned back, trotting to Caleb's side. Whatever had been there wasn't there now. That didn't mean it was gone. Caleb opened the truck door and climbed in. The engine turned over rough before settling into a steady idle. Atlas jumped in beside him, positioning himself so he could see out the windshield and the side window at the same time, always covering angles. Caleb pulled onto the narrow dirt path leading away from the cabin, tires crunching over gravel and old roots. The forest closed in quickly behind him, swallowing the cabin from view like it had never been there at all. The town sat 12 miles out, just past a bend in the road where the trees finally thinned enough to let the sky through. A gas station, a hardware store, a diner with faded paint, and a sign that buzzed faintly, even in daylight. Caleb parked along the edge of the lot, engine off, hands resting on the wheel. He didn't get out right away. Atlas shifted slightly, watching the people moving in and out of the store. A man in a flannel jacket, a woman carrying groceries, no one paying attention. Caleb opened the door. The bell over the hardware store rang once as he stepped inside. The smell hit him first. Wood, metal, oil. Familiar. Grounding. Behind the counter stood a broad-shouldered man with gray in his beard. Hank. He didn't smile. "Morning," Hank said, voice flat but not unfriendly. Caleb nodded once. "Morning." Hank's eyes flicked to Atlas, then back to Caleb. He didn't ask about the dog. People around here didn't ask questions they weren't ready to hear answers to. "What can I get you?" Caleb moved down the aisle, scanning shelves. Pry bars, hammers, nails. He picked up a crowbar, weighed it in his hand, then added a heavy-duty flashlight, extra batteries, and a box of screws. Hank watched him the whole time. "Working on that place out on Birch Hollow?" Hank asked. Caleb didn't look up. "Yeah." Hank leaned his weight onto the counter, arms crossed. "That place has been empty a long time." Caleb set the items down, one by one. "Looks like it." "Long enough for things to settle," Hank added. Caleb met his eyes now. "Things?" Hank shrugged, slow. People say what they want. Old owner, Crow, kept to himself. Then one day, just gone. No family came looking. No one took the place. County couldn't give it away. Caleb slid cash across the counter. Now they did. Hank took the money, counted it without breaking eye contact. You hear anything at night yet? Caleb didn't answer. Hank nodded like that was answer enough. Boards in places like that, he said, bagging the tools. They don't always sit right. You step wrong. You go through. Caleb picked up the bag. I'll keep that in mind. Hank hesitated, then added quieter. And if you find something, you make sure it wants to be found. Caleb didn't respond. He turned and walked out, Atlas close at his side. The diner was next door. Caleb hadn't planned on going in. But Atlas slowed as they passed, nose lifting slightly. Food. Warmth. Caleb pushed the door open. Inside, the air was thick with coffee and grease, the low hum of voices filling the space. A few heads turned. Not long. Just enough to mark him as new. He chose a booth near the window, back to the wall. Atlas lay down beside him, facing the door. A waitress approached, mid-50s, tired eyes, but steady hands. What'll it be? She asked. Coffee, Caleb said, and whatever's quick. She nodded, scribbled, and left. Caleb watched the street through the glass. The reflection showed more than the outside. Movement behind him, shapes shifting. He tracked them without turning. A man at the counter glanced his way, then looked back down. Another near the door stepped outside, lighting a cigarette. Nothing unusual. Still didn't feel clean. The coffee came. Hot. Strong. Caleb wrapped his hands around the mug, letting the heat sink in. Atlas shifted once, then stilled. Caleb's eyes flicked down. The dog wasn't looking at the door anymore. He was looking at the floor. Not here. Not this place. Somewhere else. Caleb's grip tightened around the mug. The cabin. The boards. The hollow sound. He exhaled slowly. Whatever was under that floor, it wasn't just old wood and bad construction, and whatever had passed through the trees that morning, it knew something was there. Caleb set the mug down. Finish up, he murmured. Atlas didn't move, but his ears lifted. Caleb looked back out the window. The road leading out of town stretched empty for a long moment. Then, far down the line, a dark truck turned off onto the same road that led toward Birch Hollow. Caleb didn't blink. He just watched it go, and started counting the minutes it would take to get back. 12 miles out. Less if he pushed the truck harder than he should. Caleb didn't finish the coffee. He left cash on the table and stood. Atlas was already up before the chair scraped, body angled toward the door like he'd been waiting for the same decision. Outside, the air felt thinner. The road back stretched quiet, dust lifting behind the tires as Caleb drove faster than he had earlier. Not reckless, just efficient. Every turn taken clean, every blind spot cleared before he reached it. The truck he'd seen didn't come back into view. That didn't mean anything. It just meant whoever was driving it didn't want to be seen twice. Caleb eased off the gas as the forest closed in again. The path to Birch Hollow wasn't the kind of road you took by accident. If someone had gone that way, they meant to. He killed the engine 100 yards short of the cabin. Atlas was already alert, ears forward, breath shallow. Caleb opened the door without a sound and stepped out, closing it gently behind him. He didn't take the tools. Not yet. First came the sweep. He moved through the trees instead of taking the path, boots finding the ground between roots, avoiding loose gravel. The forest held still around him, But it wasn't empty. He could feel it. The cabin came into view through the branches. Nothing obvious. Door closed. Windows unchanged. But the ground told a different story. Caleb crouched near the edge of the clearing. Tracks. Fresh. Not his. Boot prints, deeper than they should have been in the dry soil. Someone had moved quickly, maybe carrying weight. Atlas let out a low breath beside him. Caleb traced the direction. The tracks circled the cabin once, then stopped near the back corner, right where Atlas had paused earlier that morning. Same spot, Caleb murmured. Atlas shifted, nose lowering again, following the scent trail. His body stiffened as he reached the back wall. Caleb followed slower. The boards there were warped, darkened by years of weather. One section looked slightly disturbed, not broken, just touched. He ran his fingers along the edge. A faint smear. Dirt. Fresh. Caleb pulled his hand back, eyes narrowing. Whoever had been here, they hadn't gone inside. They'd stayed outside, watched, waited. His gaze lifted, scanning the tree line again. Angles, lines of sight, places someone could sit for hours without being seen. Too many. Atlas turned suddenly, head snapping toward the left side of the clearing. A sharp, quiet growl built in his chest. Caleb followed the line. Nothing moved. But the silence shifted. Not broken, just tightened. Caleb stood slowly, weight balanced, every sense stretched thin. His hand drifted toward his side again, fingers curling around empty air where a weapon used to be. He exhaled once. "Not today," he whispered. Atlas didn't relax. Neither did he. After a long moment, Caleb stepped back toward the front of the cabin. He didn't turn his back on the woods until the door was in reach. Inside, the air felt colder than before. Not temperature. Something else. He shut the door and set the latch. Atlas moved immediately to the center of the room, back to the same spot in the floor. This time, he didn't hesitate. His claws struck the wood again, sharper, faster. Caleb dropped the bag of tools onto the table. "All right," he said. "No more waiting." He crossed the room, grabbed the crowbar, and knelt beside Atlas. The seam in the boards looked clearer now in the daylight, like it had always been there, and he'd just refused to see it. He wedged the tip of the bar into the edge, paused, listened. Nothing beneath, nothing outside, just his own breathing. Caleb pushed down. The wood groaned, resisting at first, then gave with a dry crack that echoed through the cabin. Dust lifted into the beam of light, drifting slow. Atlas stepped back half a pace but didn't leave. The board lifted just enough to reveal darkness underneath. Not dirt. Not foundation. Space. Caleb adjusted his grip and pulled harder. The plank came free. Cold air rose from below, stale and still, carrying a smell that didn't belong to the forest. Old metal. Paper. Time. Caleb held the board aside, flashlight already in his other hand. He didn't shine it down right away. Instead, he listened, counting again. 5. 10. Nothing moved. No sound came back up. Atlas leaned forward, nose hovering over the opening, ears locked tight. Caleb clicked the light on. The beam cut through the darkness below, revealing the edge of something solid. Not natural. A surface. Flat. Man-made. Caleb's grip tightened on the flashlight. "Yeah," he said quietly. "You were right." Atlas didn't react. He was already looking past the hole, back toward the door. Caleb followed his gaze, and for the first time since stepping inside, he heard it. A faint sound. Not from below, from outside. Footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. Coming closer. Caleb didn't move. Not yet. The sound was soft. Barely there. But it didn't belong to the wind. It had weight. Rhythm. Someone stepping carefully, trying not to be heard. Atlas lowered his body, muscles tight, eyes locked on the door. Caleb eased the flashlight off, letting the cabin fall back into shadow. The only light now came through the thin cracks in the boards, pale and broken. He reached for the crowbar, grip firm but controlled. The footsteps stopped, right outside. Caleb held his breath. A long second passed, then another. Nothing. No knock, no voice, just the presence of someone standing on the other side of that door. Atlas let out a low, steady growl deep in his chest. Not loud enough to give away position, but enough to warn. Caleb shifted slightly, angling his body so he had a clear line to the door and the opening in the floor behind him. No blind spots, no surprises. The handle didn't turn. Instead, there was a faint scrape, like a boot shifting on wood. Then silence again. Caleb counted. 5, 10, 15. Still nothing. His mind filled the gap whether he wanted it to or not. Dust. Heat. The sharp crack of gunfire echoing off mud walls, a voice yelling coordinates that didn't line up, the sound of boots outside a door that wasn't supposed to be opened. He blinked once, hard. The cabin snapped back into place. Cold. Quiet. Atlas was still there, still steady. Caleb exhaled slowly through his nose. "Stay," he whispered. He moved. One step, then another, each one placed with care, avoiding the loose boards that might betray him with noise. The crowbar stayed low at his side, not raised, not threatening, just ready. He stopped beside the door, listened. Nothing. He reached out, fingers brushing the wood near the frame, feeling for vibration. Sometimes you could tell if someone leaned against it, if they shifted their weight. Nothing. Caleb turned the latch slowly, paused. Atlas didn't growl louder. That was the signal. Caleb pulled the door open in one sharp motion. The porch was empty. The clearing beyond it stretched quiet and still, trees unmoving, no sign of anyone stepping away. But the dirt told the truth again. Fresh prints, closer this time, right up to the door. Then turning, heading back toward the tree line. Caleb stepped out onto the porch, scanning left, then right. Nothing moved. No engine. No voice. Whoever it was had already slipped back into the forest. Atlas came up beside him, nose working the air. His growl faded into a low rumble, uncertain now, searching. Caleb followed the tracks down the steps. They were deeper here, heavier. The stride told him more than the prints did. Whoever it was, male most likely, moved with purpose, not wandering, not lost. He knew exactly where he was going, and he knew when to leave. Caleb straightened slowly. "Watching," he said under his breath. Atlas flicked an ear. Caleb turned back toward the cabin. The open door. The broken floor. The space underneath. All of it sat there, waiting. He stepped inside again, slower this time. Atlas followed, but he didn't return to the center of the room. He stayed near the door, body angled outward, guarding. Caleb crouched beside the opening in the floor once more. The cold air from below felt sharper now, like it carried something with it. He brought the flashlight up again, hesitated for a second, then angled the beam downward. The light revealed more this time. Edges, straight lines, not just a surface, corners, a box, metal by the look of it, old, coated in dust, but intact. Caleb leaned closer, bracing one hand against the floor. The beam shifted. There were other shapes down there too, smaller, wrapped in something that had once been cloth. His jaw tightened. Someone had hidden this, carefully, deliberately, and someone else had come back for it. Atlas let out a short, sharp sound behind him. Caleb didn't turn right away. "Easy," he said. But Atlas wasn't looking at the door anymore. He was looking at the window. Caleb followed his gaze. For a split second, something moved outside. A shadow cutting across the gap between two trees, too fast to make out, gone before the mind could catch up. Caleb rose in one smooth motion, turning toward the wall, crowbar lifting slightly now. His breathing stayed controlled, but his pulse had picked up. Not fear. Recognition. The kind that settled deep in the bones. This wasn't over. Not even close. Behind him, the open space in the floor seemed to breathe cold air into the room, and for the first time, Caleb understood one thing clearly. Whatever was buried under that cabin wasn't just forgotten. It was being watched. Caleb didn't lower the crowbar. He held it loose in his hand, not raised, not threatening, just part of him now, the way a rifle used to be. His eyes stayed on the window for a long moment after the shadow disappeared, waiting for it to return. It didn't. The trees outside stood still again, their branches barely shifting in the late afternoon light. No movement. No sound. Just the same quiet that had been there before. But it wasn't the same anymore. Atlas didn't take his eyes off the glass. Caleb stepped closer, slow, controlled. He angled himself just enough to catch the reflection in the window instead of exposing himself directly. Nothing behind him, nothing inside. He turned his head slightly, listening. No footsteps, no engine, no voice. Whoever had been there had pulled back again. "Yeah," Caleb murmured. He lowered the crowbar just a fraction. Atlas shifted, then moved, not toward the window, not toward the door, but back toward the center of the cabin, toward the hole. Caleb followed him. The dog didn't hesitate this time. He stepped right up to the opening, nose lowering into the cold air rising from below. His body went rigid again, but not with fear. Focus. Recognition. Caleb crouched beside him. "You smell something?" Atlas didn't respond. He didn't need to. His tail stayed still, his ears angled forward, his breathing slowed, deeper now, as if pulling something up from below the surface. Caleb brought the flashlight back on and angled it down again. The metal box sat where he'd seen it before, edges catching the light. Beside it, smaller shapes wrapped in what looked like oilcloth, brittle with age. Everything down there had been placed carefully, not dumped, organized, intentional. Caleb's eyes moved over the edges of the compartment. No signs of disturbance, no fresh dirt. Whoever had been watching hadn't opened it. They were waiting for him to do it. Atlas let out a low, sharp sound. Caleb pulled his attention back. The dog's head tilted slightly, nose tracking along the edge of the opening. Not just the air below. The wood. Caleb shifted closer. "Show me," he said quietly. Atlas stepped to the side, then tapped once at a section of floor just beyond the hole. Not random. Deliberate. Caleb narrowed his eyes. He knocked again with his knuckles. Solid. He moved a few inches. Knocked again. Different. Not as hollow as the main opening, but not right either. A second space. Smaller. Hidden deeper. Caleb exhaled slowly. "All right." Atlas backed up just enough to give him room. Caleb set the flashlight on its side so the beam cut across the floor, casting long shadows that made the seams easier to see. There, barely visible lines where the boards didn't quite match the rest. More than one section. This wasn't just a hole, it was a system. Caleb reached for the crowbar again and slid the tip under the edge Atlas had marked. He applied pressure, careful this time, not forcing it too fast. The wood creaked, held, then shifted. A thinner board lifted just enough to reveal a narrow gap beneath. Caleb paused. Listened. Nothing. He pulled harder. The piece came free with a dry snap, smaller than the first, lighter. Underneath, not a box. A space just large enough for something flat, wrapped, protected. Caleb set the board aside and leaned in, fingers brushing against the material. It crumbled slightly at the edges, but the center held. Oilcloth, same as the others. He lifted it carefully, bringing it into the light. Atlas stepped closer, nose inches away, watching every movement. Caleb unwrapped it slowly. Inside, paper. Old. Stacked. Bound with a strip that had long since lost its tension. Caleb didn't open it right away. He stared at it, jaw tightening. This wasn't random storage. This was a record. Something meant to be kept. Something meant to be found. Eventually. Atlas shifted again. Not toward the papers. Toward the door. Caleb froze. The silence outside had changed again. Not footsteps this time. Something lighter. A shift of weight. Too close. Caleb set the papers down without thinking, hand going back to the crowbar. His body moved before the thought fully formed, placing himself between Atlas and the door. Atlas didn't retreat. He stepped forward instead, one step, then another. No growl, no bark. Just presence. Caleb felt it then. The same feeling he'd had in places where lines blurred and nothing stayed still for long. They weren't alone. Not in the cabin. Not in the woods. And whatever was out there was getting closer to stepping inside. Caleb didn't move toward the door. He moved sideways. Angle, cover, distance. Atlas held position, just off-center, body between Caleb and the entrance, head slightly lowered, eyes fixed. No barking, no warning. That was worse. Caleb listened. There it was again. A faint shift of weight on the porch. Not a step. A pause. Whoever it was, they were listening too. Caleb tightened his grip on the crowbar, then slowly reached with his free hand toward the table. His fingers found the flashlight, turned it off without a click. Darkness folded over the room. Only the thin gray light from the window remained. He waited, seconds stretched. The wind moved through the trees, brushing the cabin walls in a long, low whisper. It masked smaller sounds, the kind you only caught if you already expected them. Then a soft scrape. Right against the door. Atlas's ears twitched, but he didn't break. Caleb stepped closer, silent, until he stood just to the side of the frame. Not in front, never in front. His breathing slowed. He could feel it now, the same tightening in his chest he used to get before a door got kicked in, before a room got cleared, before things went loud. Except this time, no backup, no radio, just him and Atlas. The handle didn't turn. Instead, a shadow passed across the gap beneath the door. Then another. More than one. Caleb's jaw set. Not one man. At least two. Atlas let out a low, steady rumble. The kind that didn't escalate. The kind that warned. The shadow paused. Then, a knock. Not loud. 3 taps. Even. Controlled. Caleb didn't answer. Neither did Atlas. The silence that followed felt heavier than anything that had come before. Then a voice. Low. Calm. Too calm. "We know you're in there." Caleb didn't react. Didn't even blink. The voice came again. "You found something that doesn't belong to you." Atlas's growl deepened, just a fraction. Caleb shifted his weight, barely. The boards creaked, soft, but enough. The voice outside stopped mid-breath. They heard that. Good. Let them think he was exactly where they expected. Caleb leaned closer to Atlas, voice barely a breath. "Back." Atlas hesitated, then took one step back, but his eyes never left the door. Caleb moved then, fast, but controlled. Not toward the door, toward the hole. He grabbed the smaller bundle of papers and slid them under the edge of the floor, pushing them deeper into the hidden space. His movements were precise, efficient, no wasted motion. The metal box stayed where it was. Too heavy, too obvious. The voice outside came again, sharper now. "You don't want this to go the wrong way." Caleb stood, crowbar back in his hand. He stepped toward the door, but not to open it. Just close enough. "You got the wrong place," he said. His voice came out flat. No anger, no fear. Just fact. A pause. Then a quiet chuckle from outside. "No, we don't." The wind picked up, harder this time. The cabin groaned under it, old wood shifting, the roof creaking like it might give. Thunder rolled somewhere far off, a storm coming in fast. Caleb glanced once toward the window. The light had changed. Darker now. Clouds moving in. Good. Storms erased things. Tracks, sounds, people. The man outside spoke again, closer now. Last chance. Caleb didn't answer. Atlas didn't move. The silence stretched until it snapped. Footsteps retreated. Quick, controlled, gone. Caleb didn't chase. He waited, counted. 5, 10, 30, a full minute. Nothing came back. The storm hit then. Rain slammed against the roof, sudden and violent, drowning out everything else. Wind tore through the trees, branches cracking somewhere in the distance. Caleb exhaled slowly. Atlas finally broke his stance, turning his head toward Caleb, ears still high but no longer locked. "They'll be back," Caleb said. Atlas didn't disagree. Caleb moved to the door, checked the latch, then reinforced it with a length of wood he'd set aside earlier. Not perfect, but enough to slow someone down. Then he turned back to the floor. The open space. The hidden compartments. The metal box still sitting below, untouched. The storm roared above them. Inside, the cabin felt smaller now, not safer, just contained. Caleb crouched again, staring down into the darkness. Whatever Ezekiel Crow had hidden, people were still looking for it, still willing to come in the night, still willing to stand at his door and ask for it like it belonged to them. Caleb's grip tightened on the crowbar. "Not happening," he muttered. Atlas stepped beside him, lowering himself to the floor, but not fully resting. His body stayed coiled, ready, even as the rain pounded harder overhead. Lightning flashed through the cracks in the boards, lighting the room for a split second. In that brief burst of white, the metal box below seemed to gleam, like it had been waiting. Caleb didn't look away this time, because now, it wasn't just a mystery. It was a line, and someone had already crossed it. Caleb didn't wait for morning. The storm covered sound, masked movement, erased tracks before they could settle. It was the closest thing to an advantage he was going to get. He moved fast now, not reckless, but decisive. The crowbar slid back into the gap beneath the floor. The wood protested, then gave way further, opening the space wider. Dust rose and drifted in the flicker of the stove light. Atlas stayed close, not interfering, but not stepping away either. Watching. Always watching. Caleb reached down into the opening and gripped the edge of the metal box. It was heavier than it looked, weight pulling against his shoulder as he lifted. He set it down beside him with a dull thud that barely carried over the storm. He paused, listened. Nothing but rain. He opened it. The latch broke loose with a brittle snap, rust giving way without a fight. Inside, paper. Stacks of it. Bundled tight, edges yellowed with age but still intact. Beneath them, wrapped in wax paper, smaller envelopes. A few worn leather folders. No shine of gold. No obvious prize. Caleb frowned slightly. Not what they came for, he muttered. Atlas shifted behind him. Caleb glanced back. The dog wasn't looking at the box. He was looking toward the hole. Caleb turned. The deeper compartment, the one Atlas had pointed out first. Caleb moved back to it, pulling the remaining boards free with less care now. The wood cracked, splintered, opening a wider section of the hidden space. His flashlight beam cut through the darkness again. This time, something different. Smaller, tucked deeper, wrapped tighter. Caleb reached in, fingers brushing the surface. Solid, cold. He pulled it free. Another metal container. But this one sealed tight. Edges cleaner. Less exposed to time. He set it down beside the first. Atlas stepped closer now, nose hovering inches from the second box, breath slow and steady. Yeah, Caleb said quietly. That's the one. He worked the latch. It didn't give. Not at first. He adjusted his grip, applying pressure at a different angle. Controlled force, not brute strength. The seal broke, a soft hiss of air escaping. Caleb lifted the lid. Inside, not paper, not exactly. Ledgers, bound books, thick and worn, filled with tight handwriting. Names, dates, numbers. Underneath them, envelopes, each labeled, careful, precise. Caleb picked one up, turning it slightly in the light. A name, a date, 40 years ago. He opened it. Inside, documents, agreements, signatures, records of debts, but the final page, marked differently, a line drawn across, cleared, paid. Caleb exhaled slowly. Not debts, he said. Records. Atlas's ears twitched. Caleb flipped through another. Same pattern, different names, different years, same ending. Cleared, paid. He sat back on his heels, the storm still pounding above them, the cabin shaking slightly under the weight of it. Ezekiel Crow. Not a recluse, not a ghost. Something else. Caleb reached deeper into the box. His fingers closed around something smaller. A folded piece of paper. Different from the rest. Thicker. He unfolded it carefully. A map. Rough, hand-drawn, marked with lines that didn't follow roads, followed land instead. Property boundaries. Old markers. Sections that didn't match what the county would show today. Caleb studied it, eyes narrowing. Atlas shifted again. Not restless. Alert. Caleb followed his gaze. The door. Still closed. Still quiet. But something felt off again. Not outside. Inside. Caleb turned slowly. The first metal box. The one filled with loose stacks. Something had shifted, just slightly. He hadn't touched it since opening the second. He stood, moved closer, knelt again. His hand hovered over the papers. Then he saw it. Not movement. Absence. One bundle missing. Caleb's pulse didn't spike. It dropped. Cold. Controlled. He didn't look at Atlas. Didn't need to. He already knew. They weren't alone. Hadn't been. Not when he opened the second box, not even now. Caleb stood slowly, crowbar back in his hand. His voice came out low. "Show me." Atlas moved instantly. Not toward the door, not toward the window, toward the back wall, the same place where the prints had been earlier. He stopped there, head tilted slightly, listening. Caleb stepped beside him, pressed his ear lightly against the wood, and heard it. Faint. Almost lost under the storm. Breathing. On the other side. Caleb didn't pull back. He kept his ear against the wood, eyes half closed, shutting out everything but the sound. The storm pounded above them, rain hammering the roof hard enough to shake dust loose from the beams. But beneath it, there it was. Slow, controlled. Someone holding their breath and failing. Atlas stood rigid beside him, muscles tight, a low vibration building deep in his chest. Not loud. Not yet. Caleb lifted one hand slowly, signaling stillness. He stepped back. No sudden movement. No noise. He shifted his weight, angling toward the corner of the cabin where the wall met the floor. His eyes traced the seams again, this time not for hidden compartments, but for weakness. The boards weren't original. Different grain, different cut, added later, sealed from the inside. "Not a wall," Caleb murmured. Atlas's ears flicked. Caleb raised the crowbar and wedged it between two vertical planks. He didn't slam it, didn't force it. He leaned. Pressure, slow. The wood creaked. The breathing on the other side stopped. For a moment, nothing. Then a sudden shift. Fast. Too fast. Whoever was behind that wall moved. Caleb didn't wait. He drove the crowbar in harder, the wood splitting with a sharp crack that cut through the storm. Atlas barked once, sharp, explosive, as the plank gave way. A gap opened, dark, narrow. Caleb stepped back instantly, giving space. A figure burst through, not at him, past him, straight toward the door. Caleb pivoted, reflex snapping into place. He reached, grabbing at fabric, catching the edge of a jacket. The man twisted hard, slipping free, slamming into the door and forcing it open with his shoulder. Rain and wind exploded into the cabin. Atlas lunged. Teeth caught cloth, then skin. The man shouted, a short, sharp sound, stumbling forward onto the porch. He kicked back, connecting just enough to break Atlas's grip, then ran, vanishing into the storm without looking back. Caleb stepped to the doorway, crowbar raised, but didn't chase. The rain had already swallowed him, tracks gone before they formed, sound erased before it carried. Caleb stood there, breathing steady, eyes locked on the trees. Then he stepped back inside, closed the door, set the latch. Atlas stood near the threshold, chest heaving slightly, rainwater dripping from his coat. A thin line of red marked his muzzle, not his. Caleb crouched beside him. "You good?" he asked quietly. Atlas didn't answer, but his stance held. No limp, no hesitation. Caleb nodded once. Then he turned back to the wall. The broken planks now revealed what had been hidden behind them. A narrow crawl space. Not deep, not natural. Built. Just wide enough for a man to move through. Caleb grabbed the flashlight and angled it inside. The beam caught rough supports, packed dirt, and something else. A path. Leading away from the cabin. Not recent. Old, but still usable. Caleb exhaled slowly. "Back way," he said. Atlas stepped closer, nose working the air at the opening. He let out a low, uncertain sound. Not fear, not warning. Recognition. Caleb followed the beam deeper. There, just at the edge of the light. Something caught. A scrap of fabric. Torn. Left behind. He reached in, pulling it free. Dark material. Wet now from the storm. And something else. A mark. Not a logo. Not a brand. A stitched symbol. Faded. Military. Caleb's fingers tightened slightly around it. Not standard issue, but close enough. Close enough to mean something. Atlas shifted again, pressing lightly against Caleb's side. Caleb sat back on his heels, the storm still raging above, the cabin no longer just a shelter, but a crossing point. A place someone had used, watched, returned to. He glanced back toward the floor, the open compartments, the missing bundle, the ledgers, the map. It wasn't about money. Not really. It was about what those records meant, who they connected, and who might want them gone. Caleb stood slowly. His body felt different now. Not cornered, not reactive, aligned, like it had been a long time ago. "All right," he said under his breath. Atlas's ears lifted. Caleb looked toward the crawl space again, then to the door, then back to the ledgers. "They're not coming for the box," he said. "They're coming for the story." Atlas didn't move, but he didn't look away either. And for the first time since this started, Caleb understood something clearly. Ezekiel Crow hadn't just hidden something. He had buried a truth. And now, someone was willing to crawl through the walls to keep it that way. The storm didn't last forever. By morning, the rain had thinned into a slow drip from the trees, each drop hitting the ground with a quiet rhythm that replaced the chaos of the night. The forest looked washed clean. Too clean. Caleb stood on the porch, scanning the clearing. No tracks remained. No sign of the man who had been inside his walls. Like he had never been there. Atlas stood beside him, still, alert, but calmer now. The tension hadn't left, but it had settled deeper, coiled instead of stretched. Caleb stepped down into the mud and walked the perimeter again. Same pattern, same habit. Nothing. He came back inside and looked at the crawl space, then at the open floor. Everything still exposed. Everything vulnerable. "Not like this," he said quietly. He spent the next hour closing it back up. Not permanently, not hiding it again, but enough to buy time. The boards went back in place, the seams covered just enough to pass a glance. The ledgers stayed out. The map stayed folded in his jacket. The missing bundle. That stayed missing. Atlas didn't leave his side once. By midday, Caleb was back in town. The truck rolled into the same gravel lot, slower this time. Not urgency, purpose. Atlas watched through the window as Caleb stepped out. The hardware store bell rang again. Hank looked up immediately. "You look like you didn't sleep," he said. Caleb didn't answer that. He set the scrap of fabric on the counter. Hank glanced at it once. Then again, slower. "Where'd you get this?" "Someone left it," Caleb said. Hank didn't touch it, but his expression shifted. Not surprise. Recognition. "That place," Hank said quietly. "You should have walked away." Caleb leaned one hand on the counter. Too late for that. Hank exhaled, slow. "Crow didn't just disappear," he said. "People came around after he was gone. Not from here. Didn't ask questions like normal folks. Didn't stay long either." Caleb held his gaze. "They come back?" Hank hesitated, then nodded once. Every few years. Caleb straightened. Looking for what? Hank shook his head. Whatever he didn't leave behind. Caleb picked up the fabric. He left something. Hank didn't argue. He just said, "Then you better decide what you're going to do with it before they decide for you." The diner was quieter this time. Caleb took the same seat. Same angle. Same view. Atlas lay beside him, but his posture was different. Head lower, body closer to Caleb's leg. Guarding. The waitress came by. "Back again," she said. Caleb nodded. "Just coffee," she poured without asking anything else. He watched the door. Waited. Didn't take long. The SUV pulled in slow. Silver. Clean. Out of place. Caleb didn't move. Atlas's ears lifted. The door opened. Rachel Hayes stepped inside. She paused just inside the doorway, letting her eyes adjust. Then she saw him. Of course she did. She walked over, steady, controlled. No hesitation, no surprise. "You look different," she said. Caleb didn't stand. "You came a long way." She sat across from him without being asked. "I saw the article," she said. Caleb didn't react. "What article?" Rachel studied him for a second, then reached into her bag and slid a folded newspaper across the table. Local print, small column, a mention of the property, of Crow, of recent activity. Caleb glanced at it, then pushed it back. "Doesn't say much." "It says enough," Rachel replied. Atlas shifted slightly, placing himself between them, his head just visible above the edge of the table. Rachel looked at the dog. "He's still with you?" Caleb didn't answer. Rachel leaned forward slightly. "You found something, didn't you?" Silence. Then, "You didn't come back when it was just me and him," Caleb said. Rachel blinked once. "That's not fair." Caleb's eyes didn't move. Nothing about it was fair. She exhaled, controlled, like she was managing something under the surface. "I was trying to help you. You took the house, you signed. I trusted you." The words landed quiet, heavy. Rachel looked away for a second, then back. "There are people asking about you," she said. Caleb didn't react. "They're not local," she added. "They asked me questions. About you. About where you went." Atlas let out a low sound. Caleb's hand dropped lightly to his side, brushing against the dog's neck. "You tell them?" Rachel hesitated. "Not everything." Caleb nodded once. "Enough." Rachel leaned in. "Whatever you found, Caleb, this isn't something you can handle alone." He held her gaze. "I'm not alone." Atlas didn't move. Rachel's eyes flicked to the dog again, then back. "You don't understand what this is," she said. Caleb stood, slow, deliberate. "I understand enough." He dropped cash on the table. Rachel stood too. "Caleb." He didn't stop, didn't turn. Atlas moved with him, tight at his side. Behind them, Rachel's voice didn't follow. Outside, the air felt heavier than before. Caleb walked to the truck, opened the door, then paused. He looked out toward the road. Same direction as yesterday. Same line of sight. Empty for now. He got in. Started the engine. Atlas settled beside him. Caleb gripped the wheel, eyes steady. "They came through the walls," he said quietly. Atlas didn't move. "They'll come through anything." The truck rolled forward, back toward Birch Hollow, back toward the cabin, back toward whatever Ezekiel Crow had left behind, and whatever was coming to take it. The road felt longer this time, not because of distance, because of what waited at the end of it. Caleb didn't rush. He kept the speed steady, eyes moving between the road and the tree line, checking reflections in the side mirror every few seconds. Atlas stayed upright in the passenger seat, head angled slightly toward the window, tracking movement Caleb couldn't see yet. Halfway there, Atlas stiffened. Caleb saw it in the corner of his eye. Not a full reaction. Just a shift. He eased off the gas. "Where?" he murmured. Atlas didn't bark, didn't growl. He just stared into the trees on the right side of the road. Caleb followed the line. Nothing obvious. But the feeling came back. That same pressure in the air. They weren't ahead of it. They were inside it. Caleb drove the last stretch slower, cutting the engine again before the cabin came into view. He coasted the final yards, letting the truck roll silent into place. Atlas was out before the door fully opened. He hit the ground running, then stopped, hard. A sharp, pained sound tore out of him. Caleb moved instantly. Atlas had stepped into something. Wire. Thin. Almost invisible. Strung low between two stakes driven into the ground just beyond the porch. Caleb dropped to one knee, cutting it free with the edge of the crowbar. Atlas pulled back, but not before the wire snapped tight across his front leg. Blood surfaced fast. Not deep, but enough. Caleb's hands were already working. "Stay," he said, low but firm. Atlas didn't fight, didn't whine. He held still, breathing fast but controlled. Caleb pulled a small kit from his jacket, tearing it open with his teeth. Gauze. Wrap. Pressure first. The forest stayed quiet. Too quiet. Caleb didn't look up while he worked. That was the mistake they wanted. He finished the wrap, tight and clean, then pressed his forehead briefly against Atlas's. "Good boy," he said. Atlas leaned into him once, just once, then pulled back, eyes already scanning again, still working, even hurt. Caleb stood slowly. His eyes moved to the porch, the door, closed, but something had changed. He stepped closer. The latch had been forced, not broken, tested. Caleb pushed the door open. Inside, nothing looked disturbed. Too clean. He stepped in, slow. Atlas followed, favoring the leg just enough to notice. Caleb didn't go to the floor, didn't go to the crawl space. He went to the table. The ledgers. Still there. Untouched. His eyes narrowed. "They didn't come for this," he said. Atlas let out a low sound. Caleb turned toward the wall. The broken section where the man had escaped. The crawl space. He moved to it, crouching low, flashlight already in hand. He didn't turn it on right away. He listened first. Nothing. Then, a faint shift. Deep inside. Not close. Moving away. Caleb flicked the light on. The beam cut into the narrow tunnel, just in time to catch movement. A figure, farther down now, crawling fast, dragging something behind him. A bag. Heavy. Caleb didn't hesitate. He moved, dropping to his knees, then into the crawl space, body low, crowbar tight in one hand, flashlight in the other. Atlas followed to the edge, but didn't go in. He stayed at the entrance, guarding. Caleb pushed forward, ignoring the tight space, the dirt pressing against his shoulders. The air inside was colder, damp, carrying the smell of old earth and something metallic. Ahead, the figure slipped, just for a second. Enough. Caleb closed the distance, reaching out. His hand caught the strap. The man twisted violently, kicking back. The confined space turned every movement into impact. The kick caught Caleb's shoulder, driving him back just enough. The bag tore loose. The man didn't stop. He crawled faster, disappearing into darkness beyond the reach of the light. Caleb didn't chase further. Not blind. Not into ground he didn't know. He pulled the bag back toward him instead, dragging it into the light, then back out into the cabin. Atlas stepped forward immediately, nose pressing against the fabric. Caleb dropped the bag onto the floor and opened it. Inside, documents. Not random, not old, recent, names, addresses, and at the top, a file, marked Caleb Hayes. Caleb didn't react, didn't move. He just stared at it for a long second, then closed the bag. Atlas shifted beside him, leaning slightly into his leg. Caleb rested a hand on the dog's head. "They're not just looking for Crow," he said quietly. Atlas didn't look away. Caleb's eyes moved back to the crawl space, then to the door, then to the woods beyond. "They've been looking for me." The cabin fell silent around them. Not empty, not safe, but clear. This wasn't about what was buried anymore. It was about who knew it had been found, and who they were willing to owe through, to take it back. Caleb didn't open the file again. He didn't need to. Seeing his name on it once was enough. The cabin felt smaller now, like the walls had closed in just a little tighter. Not because of fear, but because everything inside it had a purpose now. Every board, every shadow, every sound. Atlas shifted beside him, lowering himself slowly onto the floor. The wrapped leg trembled once before settling. Caleb noticed. He always noticed. He crouched down, checking the bandage. Still tight. Still clean. No fresh blood pushing through. "Hold together," he murmured. Atlas's ears flicked. That was all. Caleb sat back against the wall, the file still inside the bag at his side. For the first time in a long while, he didn't scan the room, didn't check the door. He just sat, listening to Atlas breathe. Slow, steady, alive. The silence stretched. Different this time, not waiting for something to break it. Just there. Caleb reached over, pulling the bag closer. He opened it again, slower now, and took the file out. His name stared back at him. Typed. Not handwritten. Recent. He opened it. Inside. Pages. Clean. Organized. Observations. Movements. Dates. He read without reacting. Times he'd stopped for gas. The motel on Route 7. The library computer he'd used. Even the day he signed for the cabin. Caleb closed the file. "They've been tracking," he said quietly. Atlas didn't move. Caleb leaned his head back against the wall, eyes closing for a brief second. Just one. But it was enough. The memory came fast. Dust in the air. The hum of a generator somewhere behind him. A door that shouldn't have been opened. He saw it again. The moment everything went wrong. The second where a decision didn't line up with the information he had. The cost of that second. He opened his eyes. The cabin returned. Cold wood. Dim light. Atlas beside him. Not alone. Not anymore. Caleb exhaled slowly. "They picked the wrong place," he said. Atlas lifted his head slightly. Caleb stood. Slow. Deliberate. He moved to the table and gathered the ledgers, stacking them carefully. The map followed, folded and slipped into his jacket. The bag, everything else he closed and set aside. Not hidden. Not anymore. Let them know. He walked to the door and opened it. The forest stood quiet. No movement. No watchers. But that didn't matter now. Caleb stepped out onto the porch. Atlas followed, slower this time, favoring the leg but refusing to stay behind. They stood there together, looking out. For a long moment, Caleb didn't scan the tree line, didn't check the angles, didn't count exits. He just stood. The wind moved through the trees, softer now, carrying the smell of wet earth and pine. Somewhere in the distance, water dripped steadily from branches, a quiet rhythm that filled the space between sounds. Caleb's shoulders eased. Not all the way, but enough. Behind him, the cabin stood, patched, broken, but still holding. The floor still hid what it needed to. The walls still carried what they had been built to keep. And for the first time since he'd arrived, it didn't feel like a place he was passing through. It felt like something else, something steadier. Atlas stepped closer, pressing lightly against his leg. Caleb rested a hand on the dog's head. "You did good," he said. Atlas didn't move away. They stayed like that for a while. No rush, no urgency, just presence. Caleb looked out at the forest again. Not searching this time. Seeing. "They'll come back," he said quietly. Atlas's ears twitched. Caleb nodded once. "Let them." The words didn't carry anger, didn't carry challenge, just certainty. Because this wasn't about running anymore, wasn't about reacting. It was about holding ground. The cabin creaked softly behind them, settling into itself. Caleb didn't turn. He didn't need to. For the first time in years, he wasn't waiting for the next thing to break the silence. He was standing inside it, and it held. The war wasn't following him anymore. It had stopped at the edge of the trees, and whatever came next would have to step into his ground to reach him. Caleb Hayes stood there, at the edge of the forest, one hand resting on the dog that had never left his side, and finally understood what it meant. To stay. If this story meant something to you, don't just scroll away. Drop a simple one in the comments if you believe loyalty like Atlas still exists. Or type stay if you've ever had to rebuild your life from nothing. I read every single one. And if you want more stories like this, real, raw, and worth your time, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications, because the next story might hit even closer to home.